All right, well, thank you very much. We are here for the second panel of the day, which is the titled Generative AI and the Future of Journalism. Over the past, it's just a little under a year now, isn't it? We've really entered a new world, and ChatGPT and the other generative AI, both text and image, have started already to flood the internet with AI-generated content, visual and written, and you know, I mean, they've been used already in the most extraordinary and creative ways by, you know, for purposes both good and not so good. But we're here in particular to look at the implications for our business, for journalism. And I've got the honour of being joined by an incredibly distinguished and knowledgeable panel. I'm going to briefly introduce them. So this, on my immediate right here, is Matthew Tostevin, who is the standards editor for Newsweek magazine, my employer also, and was the man who led the process that Newsweek recently went through, where we wrote and adopted a policy for how our journalists should use generative AI. Next to him is Clayton Weimers from the Reporters Without Borders, RSF, as it's known by its French initials, and they are poised. They have just been through a several-month consultation period, and they are now poised to release a charter which lays out some of the principles that news organisations ought to consider when they use AI. Beyond him is Laura Hazard-Owen, who is the editor of the Nieman Labs at Harvard University, which is a journalism non-profit. And Nieman have also been looking very hard at this issue and surveying the various policies that are out there. And so she's going to talk to us about that. And then last, but by no means least, Dušan, right at the end there, is the publisher of Vreme, which is Serbian actually for time. So Vreme, or Time magazine, us Newsweekers won't hold that against him. But Vreme is a storied media brand in Serbia, and I was just telling him earlier, I remember in the 90s as a young BBC producer trying to understand what was going on in the Balkans. The weekly digest they produced of English translated articles, from their own and other reporters was just invaluable in terms of, educating me about what was going on in this, at that time, very troubled and complicated parts of the world. So, without further ado, I'm going to pitch right in. I'm going to start with a few questions, but I want, panelists, please feel free to, leap in on each other. I want this to try and be as spontaneous as possible, and if people have questions, put your hand up. I'll try and keep my eyes open. We don't have to wait till right at the end. Although I do want to take moderator's privilege and have a bit of a bash first myself before turning over the mic to any of you amateur questioners out there. So, well, actually, probably quite a few professionals and some doubtless more distinguished than myself. But so let me start, if I may, Clayton, with you. Tell us about the consultation you've been doing at RSF. Who have you been talking to? What have you been finding out? Why is it important to have a charter rather than just letting each newsroom decide?
Sure. So, we started this process a little over a year ago, and really got accelerated with the release of ChatGPT 4, which made clear that we're all basically living in the generative AI now. So we convened this process in order to bring in as many stakeholders as possible to put together an ethics charter that would be a sort of guide of principles on how AI should be deployed by news media. The process was chaired by the Nobel laureate Maria Ressa, the founder in the Philippines, and it consists of journalists and academic researchers and tech experts from 13 different countries, making sure that so many different perspectives are involved. But it might actually be helpful to talk about what it isn't. What it isn't is a replacement for every newsroom to come up with its own internal guidelines of how they use AI. What it isn't is a replacement for policy regulation, which...
Apologies. Do we have people from live stream watching this complaining that the volume is too low? So please take it up.
Sure.
And we can use this one very neatly.
So it isn't a replacement for internal guidelines at individual newsrooms. It also isn't a replacement for policy regulation at the governmental level. And it's not trying to protect any short-term economic interests of certain media organizations, be they legacy or new school. What it's trying to do is set out some very long-term, high-level view principles that we can all come to a consensus around that should guide the way AI is deployed in news media. And the central value that brings it all together is the right to reliable information. Because so often when we talk about how AI is going to be deployed and impact our lives, it's about convenience, it's about speeding up processes, but it's never about how it is going to improve the quality of the information that you have access to. And I think we're all acutely aware these days of how vulnerable we are to mis and disinformation, to fake news, to the spreading of rumors, which are privileged over verifiable, reliable information by recommendation algorithms. And so it's incredibly important that we make sure that these systems are not just generating reliable information, but also sharing reliable information, and that they're transparent in how they do so.
Thank you. Matthew, would you like to talk about how that's worked, that process of developing the policy worked in Newsweek's case, and just you talked a little bit about the policy this morning in your keynote, but perhaps in a bit more detail you can go through what it implies for the journalistic staff.
Yeah, I'm very happy to talk a bit about what the process we went through at Newsweek, which is similar to lots of other news organizations as well. I mean, I think if you came towards the end of last year and you counted the number of news organizations that had an AI policy or generative AI policy, you wouldn't have found very many. Now I think you'll find that many, if not most, have policies on how to use generative AI in particular. And how to make sure that you get the benefits of it, as well as using it in a responsible way. That, as we were considering it as well, it's thinking about how we can use this to produce better journalism, and in a way that doesn't undermine the quality, which doesn't undermine the trust which people have in our work, and which really underpins the reason why they're going to read what we're producing or watch what we're producing at all. So key things there. Probably the first and sort of most key question, the sort of fundamental point, is who actually sort of has the responsibility for what's produced in a world where content of some form is generated by AI in some form. And the answer is, of course, it's not the AI. It's us. We are as responsible for anything which has any element which might have been powered by AI, as we would for anything which is generated in any other way, anything which is produced by a reporter. At the same time, we have to see the benefits that AI can potentially bring in being able to sort of speed up some of the processes and things that we have in place. Of course, we've long used spell checkers, those advanced grammar checkers. How much difference is there if you have something which can help to clean up your copy more easily? to be able to write things better. It's an obvious benefit when you're trying to produce things quickly, when you want to focus on being able to add the greatest value through original reporting, through proper sourcing, through being able to mine data, again something that the AI can help with. So there are real benefits to it, but you do also have to treat these things in a way that's responsible. And we're still very much at the sort of experimental stage as well, as many other news organisations and things are as well. So it's a matter of putting in place guidelines which are going to help us as we go forward, and which of course may need to be adapted because we just don't know what's going to happen next. But a key part of our guidelines, as we saw them, was to make sure that there are humans involved at key steps in the process. So, for instance, when it comes to generating the story idea, coming up with what you're actually going to be writing about, we still need a human involved in that. It's not going to be, maybe there are AI tools that can help to generate ideas, and why not? But you still have a human who's involved in that process. You still have a human who's involved in the actual creation of whatever the content is that you're going to publish, with the reporting, the writing, and the research. And when it comes to research, there are still big gaps in the capabilities of the AI that we see at the moment that's available. No doubt that will improve. And then there's a third person who's involved in the sort of editing and publishing of whatever it is that we're producing. So in a sense, the number of people who are involved is the same as it always was. The number of people who have to sort of serve as checks and balances, that's as it was. It's just that maybe some of the steps in between can be facilitated to some degree by the AI. Those are the sort of broad principles. We have extra rules around kind of generating images. Obviously, we can't be generating anything which could be seen as being real when it's not. But perhaps when it comes to sort of illustrations and graphics, when it comes to being able to research what might be the best images to include in the video and things, there are lots of things which the AI can potentially help us to do. But a key part for us has really been making sure that the AI work as tools, and we're just using them as tools, the same as all the actually AI-powered tools that we've been using for a long time. But really making sure that there is that sort of level of human responsibility at the different stages of the process, and making sure that we retain that, and that helps preserve our credibility and trust in our journalism.
Thank you. And Laura, is that, if I can ask about the sort of survey that you, brief survey I think it was, that you guys did earlier this year, and just in general your research into this topic, is that a baseline for a lot of organisations, a human in the loop, making sure that that it's just a tool and not an author? Talk to us about that, please.
Yeah, definitely. So at the Nieman Journalism Lab, we do see AI as probably the biggest advancement for possible change to journalism since the iPhone. So we're about 15 years old, and during that time we've seen a lot of kind of tech trends come and go that people were wondering, is this going to disrupt journalism? Is blockchain going to disrupt journalism? Is VR and AR, what are they going to do? And I think that we were rightly skeptical of a lot of those trends having much of an impact. We do see AI as having a big potential impact on the way that the industry works, to the extent that we're hiring a staff writer now who's going to be completely focused on the intersection of generative AI and journalism. We just see it as a really interesting area to be watching and reporting on. In terms of what publishers are doing now, I do think it's early stages of figuring out like what are newsroom guidelines going to be? We're seeing a lot of big newsrooms hire somebody to be in charge of this process, or they already have. The New York Times is looking to hire someone for that job right now. Other news organizations like the BBC and Newsweek obviously have someone in place. That's just the Guardian. And I think that these people are going to be charged with kind of setting out like, what is the role going to be. And I think a lot of the time, you know, we're going to see that it's not the first thing that we think of. So maybe the most obvious like use case for generative AI is articles written by the AI. And I think in most cases, we're going to see that that's not actually not what most newsrooms who are thinking thoughtfully about this end up doing. They're going to be using it as a tool in the reporting process, doing things that are hard or boring for humans to do themselves, and hopefully using it as a tool the way a journalist right now might use something like Google Translate or like a transcription software, things that do use AI already. I think that the sort of optimistic outcome here is that we see it being used as a tool to do things that we could not easily do ourselves. I think that's what most newsrooms certainly hope is going to happen. Also, I don't think a lot of folks out there are saying, okay, like, let's see how many articles we can, you know, publish that are written by AI. Although we do see some publishers doing that, and there's often these little crazy stories and foibles and weird language, and you know, we've definitely seen kind of the big flubs, but I think that will be not the most common thing that we see.
Well, I certainly hope you're correct about that. Saving the best for the last. Dušan, you have a different perspective on this. You're from the business side of Vreme, right? The publisher, and so talk to me about the way that you know, the news publications, which, you know, after all have to make a living, how can they use these tools, these AI tools, on the business side?
Thank you, Shawn. First of all, I must say that I'm really honored to speak in a panel with such relevant and prominent professionals like Laura and Clayton and Matthew. As you said, yes, my perspective in this panel will be somewhat different, because I'm not a journalist, I'm not the editor or researcher. My family is the majority shareholder of Vreme Weekly from Serbia. It's the oldest privately owned weekly news magazine in Serbia and in the region. 10 days ago we celebrated 33 years of existence of Vreme. So I will speak from the point of view of the owner, and how not about the using the AI tools in content production, but rather in using AI tools and predictive models in how to build a new distribution channels in through which we can distribute the content to our users in order to upscale our business and make it more sustainable. I see three biggest, let's say, values that AI tools can bring to the small media, small independent media operations like Vreme. First of all, it's the opportunity to make the micro-segmentation of your audience. For instance, Vreme has a small but very strong audience, because Vreme readers, they are decision makers in their industries, in economy and politics, in finance sector. They have higher salaries, they are better educated. So if we, through the AI tools, find a way how to match their needs, I guess we can monetize that relations in a greater extent. The other thing is the possibility to dynamically adjust the content that we create based on the engagement of some articles in real time, And the third thing is that is very important for us to have the AI optimized advertising campaigns that logically save us money and make us more efficient. On the other hand, two great challenges for Vreme at this moment is first, all the data now about our audience is in possession of Meta and Google. So they know our consumers better than we do, because the biggest generator of traffic that comes to our portal are social media, so they know them better. If we manage to build our own models how to approach directly to our audience, it will be helpful for us, and we can also monetize that relations in the future. The other thing is the gap between smaller media operations like Vreme and the big media conglomerates that are already present in Serbia and our region are getting bigger and bigger every day, because it's hard for us to follow that implementation of technologies the way how big media outlets do it. So there are some ways which because I am the entrepreneur, I'm always optimistic. I'm searching the ways how to overcome those challenges. And our idea was to maybe outsource some smaller startup companies or startup teams that can help us build our own ways how to get the data of our audience. Because the startup companies, what they need? They need the opportunity to test their products and their innovative ideas on the market. Vreme, as a brand that lasts for 33 years, can be a very good opportunity for them to do that. So we are both taking some risks. We are giving the platform to try their ideas, and they are giving us their innovative products to try to stay in run with those big companies. So that's the way how we are thinking about things. And the other thing, there is also the idea maybe to get the know-how and resources from some bigger media outlets that are maybe seeking for some partnerships in our region that would be ready to share their knowledge and technologies with Vreme, and in return they will get the opportunity to have the share of the market of like 20 million people, not just in Serbia but also in the Balkan region, and make some influence there. And also, I mean, these are people that speak basically the same language. They have similar cultural patterns, and that would be maybe a good opportunity for some media from the UK, or opportunity to come to our region and to work. The last thing, and I'm not a fan of that, is to finance that operations by ourselves. And that is the scenario I would like to avoid, because that would definitely influence some of our policies regarding the HR, and it will imply on some funding and investments that we are doing in some other, let's say, core journalistic areas.
Right, you'd rather make the investment in the core journalism.
Yeah.
Well, I think we all got to say
Yeah.
amen to that. I want to turn, after that overview, I want to turn to look at one issue that Clayton, that you raised before the panel, and that is the role of government in all of this. Now, we saw the Biden administration executive order, I think it was this week, wasn't it? Right, on Monday, and one of the ideas in there that seems relevant here is this watermarking idea. Clayton, could you elaborate? What is this? I mean, just give us a 30,000-foot view of the EO first, if you can, and then what is this watermarking idea?
Well, the 30,000-foot view of the executive order that the White House put out is much broader than what we're talking about here, and in many ways is kind of missing the discussion that's happening here. A lot of the policy and the debate around regulation of AI in Washington right now is centered on economics, it's centered on jobs, it's centered on national security, and there is, occasionally a little discussion off in the corner about information and watermarking and that sort of thing, but there is not a big focus on information reliability, on mis and disinformation, on how AI can be used to augment news journalism or harm news journalism. And so, that's a little bit disappointing, and that is clearly an area where groups like RSF need to do more to insert these perspectives into the policymaking process. Watermarking, though, is this idea that the audience ought to know when they're looking at synthetic content being content generated by AI systems as opposed to a more traditional organic content that's created by humans. And I think there's a consensus here. Everyone pretty much agrees that we want people to generally be aware of the information they're consuming. It does open a whole lot of technical questions like how do you actually do it, and how do you impose penalties on anyone who is found to violate a watermark policy. But if there's room for optimism about regulation right now, especially in the U.S. context, it's around this watermarking idea because there is this consensus. There is a bill in the Senate. There is the executive order from the White House driving this policy discussion. I guess the flip side for the case for pessimism here is that Congress is not known for moving fast on regulating digital technology. We still don't have a digital privacy bill to speak of after some 20 years. The Senate and the White House may be on the same page here, but who knows what's going to happen in the House right now. And at the end of the day, you said earlier, we've been living in the era of ChatGPT 4 for less than a year. I think it was last March it came out. And so the idea that we're going to get it right away on the regulatory front, that's the case for pessimism. So, I want to balance it. I think there's room for sort of a bare minimum right now, which would be watermarking.
And Matthew, you were asking some questions earlier about watermarking, especially with, it seems more straightforward perhaps with images, but talk about text. Why is that complicated?
Yeah, no, I mean, it could be potentially with images and things as well, and with video and so forth too. I mean, there must be technical questions there, and if you're imposing regulation, then who decides what needs to be regulated and how? But for me, a fundamental question around any sort of watermarking and regulation is the extent to which a particular piece of content has been generated by AI or manipulated by AI in some form, and where you draw the line, what counts as that. I mean, there's already a whole range of different ways that you can use AI-powered tools to be changing a text or indeed an image. So if you look at the sort of spectrum between fully AI created content, okay, you could understand if this article is being completely written by a computer, idea generated by a computer, written by a computer and then pushed out unadulterated, then sure, okay, definitely AI generated. What if a human's been through and made some changes or additions to that? Is it still AI generated, or is it now classified as being something different? And how much change would they have to make to that content to make a difference to it? What if you simply use AI tools in producing it and being able to write some parts of it? What if we all use spell checkers? I mean, spell checkers are AI-powered tools which change text in a certain way, and it might be a very limited way. But in all these cases, there's a question of where you draw the line. Even when it comes to photos, I mean, a lot of us, we take pictures with our phones, and to some extent, those are likely to be enhanced by the phones that we usually use to take pictures with. Does that count as AI manipulation? Probably not, but, and is an image that's fully AI generated? Yes. But there are a whole load of questions there, I think, which would still need to be answered as to exactly how and what needs to be regulated and where you draw the line between AI creation and manipulation and so forth, which still make it not necessarily something that's not worth pursuing, but raises a whole load of questions and complications too.
Laura? How do you feel about the idea of the government, stepping in?
Yeah, so I do think it's early. I think that sometimes when we've seen government bills to regulate tech and media in some way, we've seen in Canada and Australia that bills there that were intended to reduce the power of the platforms in regards to news in those countries have not necessarily turned out the way the people who are the proponents of those bills intended. I think that in the case of, for example, just like news on Facebook, Facebook was perfectly happy to just pull news off completely in the countries that were trying to regulate it, trying to make it pay publishers for their content. It's happy to just say goodbye to news entirely. So I don't necessarily think that anything that comes out right now is necessarily going to be nuanced in the way it needs to be. It's early,
Dušan, you're, in Serbia, is the government looking at regulating this field of endeavour at all, or how do you see that?
No, actually, the media have in mind that this is the topic that is becoming increasingly relevant and concerning in some way, and at this moment it's more connected to the matter of ethics and self-regulation in the newsrooms. But as far as I know, at this moment the EU is preparing some kind of bill or resolution that will be adopted, I think maybe by the end of this year. And because Serbia is the candidate for the membership in the European Union, I guess that will be some kind of paper that we will look up to in the future.
I wanted to pick up on the issue of trust that a couple of people have raised, because it seems like that's sort of at the core of a lot of these problems. How can we trust these generative, these chatbots is basically what they are. Can we trust them to produce accurate content? Can we trust them to answer the questions that we ask them, truthfully? At the moment, that seems to be no. The answer there seems to be no. So, taking this trust issue, what powers these chatbots is data, and it's our. News organisations make a great training corpus, or news content makes a great training corpus for these bots, because it is accurate, it is pretty well written often, and not always, and it is extremely broad ranging in terms of the subject matter that it covers. So. Can news organisations exploit that? Can they leverage that? Can they, make money off it? What do we think?
Clayton,
Anyone want to?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if I can speak to them making money off of it. It's just a little bit out of my expertise, but you said something earlier that was interesting about how Google and Facebook understand your audience better than you can. So these tech platforms have come come between media organizations and their audiences in a way to take control of that relationship in an unprecedented way. What's happening with generative AI, though, is media are going to lose control of the supply chain of information, essentially. So the data that goes into an AI model that trains it is all of the journalistic content that they've produced for decades or centuries even, potentially. And there's a big open question about what rights journalists and media organizations have to the content that's feeding these AI models. But then on the flip side, on the output side of things, these are closed boxes in many ways that people generally don't have a good understanding of how they work. So you're also losing control of the supply chain of information on the outlet side. We talked a little bit about the ethics charter that RSF is putting together and will be publishing on Friday at the Paris Peace Forum. We're also working on another project to build a prototype of an AI tool for journalism. And the unifying idea there is to be able to control that supply chain of information from beginning to end. It's a little early to say exactly what it's going to look like. It's still in development in those stages, but that's something we're looking forward to and excited about going soon.
Oh, it's fascinating. Matthew, would you like to say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to sort of step in. I mean, it's certainly something. I mean, something that I know that news organisations have sort of looked at as well as that. I mean, obviously these tools with their great new capabilities have been trained on something. And what have they been trained on? Well, they've been trained on the content which is out there, which is freely available, which goes back decades, and which is our content in a sense. So I certainly know that there are news organisations that are looking at how best that could be monetized, potentially not only with what's happened in the past and the archives which are being used or which have been used or which could be used for improving and training sort of large language models and so forth. But there's also the question of again what then happens in future and what happens to what happens to the need for that information and so forth in future as well. I mean, once the generative AI is learning from new content, new original content which it may have gathered, potentially learning from itself or from other sort of AI generated content and things as well. So there are a huge number of questions there and things too. And I think, I mean, you mentioned at the start that the capabilities of generative AI are pretty limited in terms of creating content and things at the moment, but I think that will change. I think it's already changing very rapidly. I know when I was sort of first playing around with ChatGPT and things earlier in the year, and you would ask it to generate something which reads fine, but it's utter rubbish. It's hallucinated. It will come up with references which are sort of completely untrue. Those things are already changing. It's getting much better. Anyone who thinks that it's not going to be as capable of being able to take information and being able to put it in a form that's as good and potentially as accurate, potentially as fair as a human is I believe wrong. So there are a huge number of questions there about how we work to make sure that those things are done in the right way. But I think one of our challenges, of course, is what could we actually do about people who potentially do it in the wrong way. We as news organisations, as responsible news organisations, are sort of talking best about how we can introduce RSS ethics code and guidelines and things. But what stops others from simply getting out there and using the available data, new data on the internet, whatever people are saying on X or elsewhere, and simply turning that into a new churn of content without necessarily the same guidelines and regulations and things. And I think that's that's going to be a really interesting area to watch as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's already happening, isn't it? We know from research from NewsGuard, among other organisations, that there are already, you know, these content farms, low quality, sort of, you know, looks a bit like news until you actually read it, but, you know, can be monetised because the algorithms that place advertisements in this huge automated ecosystem can't really distinguish. So, are there any? Yes, please. Questions from the audience.
Yes.
Could we
Oh, yeah,
share the mic?
yeah, I can do that. No worries.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I will come back to my place. My name is Olyana Boychuk and I'm Ukrainian journalist. I'm a freelance journalist here for Ukrainian media. And actually, I'm started learning AI and generative AI for like, it's been a year. I'm learning how the technology works. And actually, like, there is like good usage of the tools that you are talking about, and it's really great because it helps you journalists to find facts or to be correcting the texts and so on. There is also bad usage of AI, and the great example of that bad usage is Russian fake news. And recently I read a news about how Russians use video AI to create fake news. So they do like main host of Ukrainian TV, like they take the image and creating fake news. And my question is more for Mr. Weimers and Mr. Representative Reporters Without Borders, the organization that should prevent that stuff. Yeah, what we need to do with that fake news? How we can prevent it happening, and how we can fight with that? Because we all know that it's not true. And my question for Mr. Tostevin, maybe I'm bad.
It's very good.
I know that last names spelling so much. So my question is for you. So how the editors of the main news can prevent also, like how the organization can prevent that fake news that created by Russian propaganda with using generative AI, and how the editors can also be more concentrating in true, or how we can use it and do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Clayton, would you like to kick off, and Laura as well on the first piece of that, and then we'll come to
So for combating fake news, I mean, there are solutions that fall in largely two buckets. There's targeting the fake news to take down, which the online platforms are not particularly good at. And then there's more of the carrot approach, which is incentivizing, encouraging, and promoting trustworthy journalism. Right now, the information space, though, that's run by big tech platforms tends to give priority to the kind of content that can manipulate its algorithm. So, like sensationalists or fake news, rumors, the kind of stuff that's very, very cheap to produce, perhaps, but not necessarily reliable. It tends to over-index in news feeds or in search results. But the leafy green vegetables of your media consumption, which is your investigative journalism, your long reads, your hard news, tends to perform much worse in those environments. One of the solutions that RSF has created is called the Journalism Trust Initiative, JTI, which is an international standardization of what we call trustworthy journalism. And it doesn't look at content at all. All it does is look at the processes in the newsroom and audits essentially everything that goes on there, and gives a score to a media organization and says, yeah, you are meeting the international standards of what we consider to be authentic journalism. And the real potential for something like that is eventually that can get embedded into algorithms as a way to boost up the performance of that content and give it a competitive advantage over everything else, including the Russian propaganda and fake news. We, in fact, just announced a partnership with Microsoft to do exactly that. They're going to start promoting it on their platforms, but there's clearly more to do there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, really hard. I think this is kind of a depressing answer, but I do think that there is really only so much that news organizations can do that that consumers of the news will care about. I think that a lot of the trust initiatives are super worthy and they're important, and I do not know how or if they trickle down to readers. The research that has been done in this area of how consumers of news react to things like, I don't know, boxes with trust, like that are intended to sort of shore up trust in the news organization and in its product and in the reporter. Like, it's just very unclear that they really move the needle at all in terms of how readers are seeing this stuff. I also think we need to remember that just a lot of people are not starting their news journey with news organizations, newspapers or websites. They're going to Instagram and they're going to TikTok and they are getting their news there. And they're maybe not leaving and they're not going back to the organization at all. It's really hard. I wish I had a good answer for it, and I don't, except I just, it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, maybe we should find new ways to produce information or to protect information. Because I was learning about that for a long time, and I was asking different journalists and experts and editors about that question. And they told me that maybe it's better to work with government, how to prevent that fake news.
I mean, I think the role of what government can do is so far has been shown to be pretty limited and have a lot of possible unintended bad consequences. I think a lot of the strictest fake news laws that we've seen are actually being used to stifle free speech and journalism in some of the countries where they've been implemented. I think I come back to the belief that news organizations need to be where readers are and need to be competing in that flow of information that they're getting. They need to be on TikTok and Instagram and the places where people are getting news rather than wishing that they could go back to the way things used to be. I don't see how we compete otherwise.
I was just going to, because you asked the question, I was just going to answer very briefly on the, I mean, we obviously can't do anything about what other news organizations publish, any of them, in ourselves. I mean, though it is actually quite an interesting, it's potentially quite interesting to report and write about from that perspective. What I would say in terms of our own editorial controls is, of course, all we can do is do our best to make sure that there is better quality journalism reporting that's done honestly and based on facts, which is coming out and which can obviously counter those things. I mean, we do some fact checking, for instance, as well. So some of these things might sort of reach the level where it merits fact checking, where it merits us publishing something, particularly when something is called widespread, which is wrong. But our focus has to be also on producing what best we can, using all the tools at our disposal, to make sure that there's that sort of strong vein of continued trustworthy content which is produced.
Any other questions? I mean, I would just add on the fake news point that you know, the problem is, as long as people can make money doing this, they're you know, the incentive structure is going to be an issue. And, you know, I feel that if there is a solution, it's got to lie somewhere in the advertising ecosystem, you know, breaking that ability of these low quality content farms or fake news outlets to make money. If you can do that, then you might have a hope. If there are, oh please, yes. Thank you.
Thank you for this excellent panel. Can you hear me? One of the areas of the executive order around AI and regulation dealt with testing, dealt with looking at adverse impacts. And I was just wondering, particularly in the area of journalism, how you may be able to leverage some of the guidance and criteria from the executive order in the business of journalism to protect consumers and, you know, just address this issue of the adversarial impacts of AI. Thank you.
So that will be the testing.
Regulatory testing and other components.
That's a tough question. The executive order is somewhat limited in what it can do. Its purpose is really kicking off the debate here about how this policy regulation is going to roll out, and at the end of the day, Congress needs to step in and do anything that's going to have any sort of real impact. The EEO's biggest impact will be on how government agencies use AI. I think to the point about testing, I think a big concern is that AI systems don't reinforce or worsen like historical biases and prejudices that exist in society. Because at the end of the day, these systems really are just a mirror looking back at everything that's happened already to humanity. And so if we're just regurgitating the past, we're not moving forward. I don't know if that quite answers your question, but you know, it's an important thing that I think media organizations are going to have to grapple with as they deploy AI more and more is, you know, looking at historical biases that have been inherent in reporting for decades and making sure that we don't just build new systems to reinforce them.
Because I mean, what we've seen with, for example, with the use of some of these algorithms in the legal system, is that because they're trained on the data of, as you say, everything that's happened up to that point, they reflect those biases, you know, in sentencing or in other ways.
Yeah.
And the same is true, or the danger is the same is true of journalism. Right?
Yeah, I mean, the crude example that I think a lot of people have seen is you can ask ChatGPT to show you, or a different one, like a DeepMind, you could ask it to show you a picture of a doctor. It's probably going to show you a white man.
Any more for any more? I'm conscious that we're the only thing between you and lunch.
Shawn, can I just give the
Oh,
short
please.
closing remark?
Well, no,
Because
absolutely.
I don't want to close this discussion in such a dark tone, you understand? I really believe that the right usage of AI can bring a good to small media such as Vreme, because if we are, as Clayton said, if we try to develop our own channels to face the needs of our consumers, we will be successful in getting more money. The more money, increasing the revenues, turnovers and everything, it means that we will be more independent, especially from the state, because that is what the journalists do. The other thing where I think it is also, it has also the strong social component. If we give that tools to individual journalists, that tools can encourage them to transfer to a more entrepreneurial role. If they, individual journalists, if they have some niche audiences of themselves, they will stay rooted in their journalist identity, but they will make more money. They will not be afraid that they will lose job, because we are living in a time where journalists are losing jobs. So the AI can be very, very beneficial tool for them in the future if they understand it and if they do it right. And if we all jointly try to, beside of these big tech companies, if we try to develop some platforms that can be used by smaller media and individual journalists to go directly to their consumers. Because you know, I'm not mad at these big companies. They are doing their job. They are fighting for themselves. We should also fight for ourselves. We can. I was thinking about, there are some applications in business that can be very useful to avoid these retailers and big supermarkets, because in business also, people who sell something, they also don't know the data about their customers. The data about their customers is in big retail chains. They know when you're buying something, what are you buying and everything. And right now, there are companies that are developing applications that can help them to encourage their consumers to directly share the information between the seller and the consumer. Maybe media should do something like that. They said, there is a survey right now from the Go Study platform in Serbia. They say 10 likes, if you give someone 10 likes, machine will know you better than your colleague from work. 70 likes, they will know you better than your friend. 150 likes, they will know you better than your mother, brother and sister. 300 likes, the machine will know you better than your partner. So let's have that 300 likes in our companies, and then maybe we will do our job better and we will know our consumers better.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Please join me in thanking